Hello, welcome everybody. My name is Paulus Schoutsen, and 7 years ago, I started Home Assistant. Today, we're going to talk about everything Home Assistant. This is the first time that we talk about all our achievements from the last year directly and only online. We're doing this at our very first virtual conference. We've sold more than 4,200 conference tickets, and many others are watching via YouTube. Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Home Assistant Conference. The reason today's event is online only is because it's 2020 and everything is different. Ah, of course, my slides are failing now. That's great. At the beginning of this year, a pandemic happened, and everything that we took for granted has changed. Many of us have been homebound. 2020 also brought a lot of personal changes for me. In May, my wonderful daughter Eris was born, and in July, together with my wife and two children, we flew from California to the Netherlands to move in with my parents. My parents live in a small town close to a big city. It's a town where I grew up. And if you move back to some place where you grew up, you start to realize things. Certain things that you used to took for granted, they're actually not so much the same anywhere else. So one of the things that I used to take for granted was cycling. See, and not so much cycling itself, but actually being as a cyclist participating in traffic. Because I realized that when I cycle from my parents' house to the grocery store, every time the bike lane, which are physically separate from the road, crosses a road, cars have to yield. Whenever multiple bike lanes and roads come together, there's a roundabout, like you see on the slide, just so that cyclists always have the right of way. And we all know the Dutch are really into cycling. So, of course, their cycling infrastructure is top notch. But, but really, why is that? Is it cultural? Is it the food? No, it is because the system in the Netherlands is optimized for cycling. But this wasn't always the case. In the 60s and the 70s, the cars were winning in the Netherlands. Big squares in city centers had been turned into parking places, and there were plans to create a highway from the Amsterdam city center to the suburbs. There was also a big increase in traffic accidents, and a lot of children were dying. So Dutch people from all walks of life, they organized together and they started to protest. The idea initially was kind of waved away, but after a lot of energy to be put into organizing, they kept mobilizing. Eventually, the idea got some traction, and then a bit more, until eventually the system changed. The system changed, and the focus became on quality of life and meeting people. And that meant there was no room for cars or limited room for cars in living spaces. If you continue such a focus for 60 years, then you get the Netherlands today. It's an infrastructure that's optimized for cycling. Because people in a system, they will go along with what the system is set up for, the path of least resistance. So that if your infrastructure is the best for bikes, people will jump on a bike. And this brings us to the world of IoT, Internet of Things. Because with IoT, everything is optimized for clouds. 5 years ago, Google and Amazon released their voice assistants. The business model of these two companies evolves around knowing who you are so they can better sell you products or show you advertisements. This means that they are selling their voice assistants for very little money. A lot of consumers either have these devices in their house or they use their voice assistants on their phones. Now, if you are one of these consumers and you're going to buy your next smart home product, you want to make sure that this product works with everything that's already in your house. The only way you can integrate with those voice assistants I just mentioned is through the cloud. So now, as a manufacturer who's going to create a new smart home product, you want to reach as many consumers as possible. You want to make sure that everybody wants your product. So that means that you will have to add a cloud so you can integrate with these voice assistants. And of course, when you have a cloud already and you're building an app to control your devices, you got to make sure that the app will just talk to the cloud. You're not going to add another local API because that's more engineering effort. And the incentives right now for manufacturers are to add a cloud first, and a local API is optional. And we need to find a way to change the system, to change the incentives, so that it becomes the other way around. And things are changing, right? Like we see more and more people are talking about privacy, not just in like the general sense or related to social media, but also people are starting to talk about privacy in the smart home. We see this gaining momentum, and more major publications are picking up such stories. And this is important because to change a system, to change a problem, we first need to make people aware of the problem. Only once they're aware can they start to care. So another event that happened in the last year around this is the introduction of Project Connected Home over IP, or CHIP for short. This is a smart home protocol initiated by big technology firms to control lights, smart switches, and sensors. Yes, another smart home standard. But there are a few things around this standard that make me hopeful. The first thing that makes me hopeful is that because these big companies are involved, this could actually get like a lot of momentum. And if Amazon and Google decide to both allow manufacturers to integrate with their voice assistants via chip, then we're changing the incentives. It means that the manufacturer might decide to add chip. If Apple iPhone phones and Google Android phones also implement chip, it's yet another incentive for a manufacturer to decide to add this protocol to their product. And if a product speaks chip, then Home Assistant will be able to talk locally chip with this product without your data ever leaving the cloud or without having to even buy one of these products of the companies that built this standard. And another reason why I'm hopeful about chip is because they are together with the standard, they're building a reference open source implementation. This means that the code to implement chip is going to be available for everyone to use. And it means that the interoperability is going to be great. It also means that software development to add chip to your product is going to be significantly lower. And that, once again, might just be enough incentive for product manufacturers to add it to their products. But I do have to say, don't get your hope up just yet. They announced the standard. There's been some open source work going, but it's not there yet. And also the big technology firms that are like involved, well, they change the strategy all the time. So just because they help build a standard doesn't mean they will actually adopt it. Another thing that's really helping promoting local control and privacy is us, Home Assistant. We've been doing this for 7 years, and we've been gaining more and more momentum every year. On GitHub, where all open source in the world is hosted, we were the second most active Python project in the world this year, with 8,000 people. Like, this is 8,000 developers working on Home Assistant. Does anyone know any other software that has so many people involved? This is amazing. And actually, our numbers are way higher because GitHub groups this by project. And so they only looked at our core project. They didn't count our community moderators, people working on the documentation, our front end, our mobile apps, our operating system, the list goes on. And as we get bigger, and as we are getting more users, we're getting more collective buying power. And this matters because money talks. We can start influencing manufacturers. And if you want proof, well, why don't you ask TP-Link? TP-Link decided last month to pull an unofficial local API from their smart switches. A lot of users were unhappy because this was exactly the API that Home Assistant was using to integrate these switches, because we want local control. When we saw this happen and users were complaining, Home Assistant decided to organize. We make sure that we collect all the access TP-Link took. We make sure that we collect all the voices from our users, and we organize this on our blog. That way, we form one block towards manufacturers. And this works. TP-Link decided, okay, we're going to partially roll this back. We're going to make an official local API, and they're allowing other people to opt into beta firmware to instantly reinstate the local API. And this is not the first time this is happening. For example, 2 years ago, this happened with Logitech Harmony. 3 years ago, before that, it was with Philips Hue. Each time we organize, and each time it works. But as we grew bigger, it wasn't clear what Home Assistant is anymore. Because initially we started out as a Python application. And that Python application, we realized that, well, if you ask people to install a Python application, we're building something for a really, really, really small subset. We want to be more accessible. So Pascal Vizeli then went ahead and he built a supervisor and operating system. This allows you to turn your Raspberry Pi into a home automation hub. You install it once and you can use it. But of course, then people didn't know what they had installed anymore. We were trying to help people and that didn't work well. So we decided to change it up. Has.io, our all-in-one package, we renamed that to Home Assistant. The original app that we called Home Assistant, we call it now Core. But of course, we also have users that want more control. And so for these users, we allow them to, for example, if you don't want the operating system, they can just run the supervisor in Core. Or if you also don't want the supervisor, you can just run Core the way you want it. As we get bigger, so does our impact. And as we get bigger, it is great to know that Home Assistant is different compared to other smart home products. Heck, we're different compared to pretty much everything else. There are no investors involved with Home Assistant that want return on an investment. We're also not backed by some billion-dollar company that's doing this for a great reputation. No, it's a way smaller and direct relationship. We have Home Assistant, which is available for free to our users. The users can then pay Nabu Casa for Home Assistant Cloud. When they do so, they will get cloud services for the Home Assistant instance, like text-to-speech, but they also allow Nabu Casa to pay employees to work directly on Home Assistant. Nabu Casa currently employs 8 people working full-time on Home Assistant. These people work on the maintenance of the current features that we have and our operating system. They work together with collaborators to add new features to the system. But we also, for example, when a TP-Link pulls a local API, help organize. We also organize community events like our release party live streams and this conference. With the setup that we have, Nabu Casa works directly for the users. It's a direct relationship. Incentives are aligned. And so for Nabu Casa, they don't have to satisfy anyone but the Home Assistant users. And that's also why we don't see any advertisements in Home Assistant. We don't see advertisements on our website, our documentation, or our forums. And even a conference like this, we decide to sell the tickets. There's no profit on the tickets because all the costs are already covered by the users paying for Home Assistant Cloud. And Home Assistant is open source. And all the drivers that Home Assistant uses to integrate devices and services, they work as standalone projects. This means that if a group of people or a company decides to create a new home automation product, they can actually start using our code. And we would like to see that because as people are using our code, they will inherit our vision for local control and privacy. Because we don't see other smart home vendors that also use local control and privacy as a competition. We see them as our allies. Because together, all our users combined, together we are a voice towards the manufacturers to please make local APIs a default in the next product. Sorry, lost track. It's up to us all to help spread this message, to create the world we want to see. So the next time you buy a smart home product, try to buy one where the cloud is optional. Ask your manufacturers for local APIs. And support the products that are doing the right thing. Because the products that do the right thing today and have a local API, those will be the ones that can still work in 10 years. In the end of the day, it's your home, your data, and your life. Let's work together to keep it this way for you and for everybody else. Thank you.
Good evening from Switzerland. My name is Pascal Vizeli. I'm the founder of a supervisor and operating system. So let's have a look at this project in 2020. We integrated a new audio system which allows us to share the sound card and settings across all add-ons and core. It's based on a Pulse audio sound system for Linux. With a simple option, you can decide which input and output the add-on should use to play or receive audio. The picture shows, for example, the Spotify add-on from a community store. With this add-on, you can turn your Home Assist into a streaming target. Finally, we made it and integrated the network manager from operating system. Now you can manage the whole network over the supervisor panel. This includes Ethernet and wireless connectivity, but also virtual LAN for homes with complex network infrastructure. The Observer. It's like a status and help web dashboard. It allows you to get information without attaching a keyboard and monitor to your headless installation. If everything is running, you cannot see a lot of information to prevent data leaks. But if some things are unaccepted, you see more details that can help you to fix the issue. Don't worry about the port. You can use your smartphone to look up the port over the number keyboard if you're typing help. The observer shows the system log also in a landing page. You can click on the blue dot to see what is going on in the background during the setup. On our operating system, we added the feature Data Disk. This allows you to have all your data on an external drive. The data disk is only useful for boards with SD card only support. With this solution, the OS gets booted from internal storage and loads your data from the USB disk. This is our recommended way to use USB drives. You get the full advantage of the Linux kernel and hardware support. It works on all our supported platforms. It boots fast without any latency issues or other downsides like we know from USB boot. Here you can see all our supported platforms. From left to right, it's going more powerful. One of my favorite is the Auth-Read N2 Plus, added this year with release 4. It's cheaper than the Intel NUC, but has almost the same power. It comes with 6 ARM cores around 2 GHz and an excellent passive cooling design. You can attach a high-speed eMMC storage up to 128 GB and a battery to use the real-time clock on top. This board gives the best user experience on a single-board computer for using Home Assist. It's the first choice if you need a new hardware. We're working also with other projects and companies to improve our hardware support, and we recontribute our bug fix back in example to Linux kernel. Our major goal in 2020 was to improve the quality and stability of Supervisor and operating system. The first step was to limit our supported scope to increase the quality and test. As next step, we integrated Sentry as opt-in feature. Sentry can automatically send all troubles and crash from your local instance. This tool helps us to understand bugs and issues which was happening in your homes. Thanks for everybody who shared this information with us. Like you can see in the screenshot, we can sort and track issues based on affected installation and a lot more. With Sentry, we identified and resolved over 100 bugs this year. Thanks for your attention. I forward now to Franck.
Hi there, I'm Frank, and welcome to my office in the Netherlands, which is, by the way, also my living room. Kind of normal these days, I guess. But that's not why I'm here today. Today, I'm here to talk to you about automations and scripts. So, in this department, a lot has changed past year. Like, the engine has been extended quite a bit, mainly empowering our advanced user base. And we have added a ton of new features to the YAML-based configurations, allowing you to do more with less configuration, but also allowing you to do the same with less automations. And a lot of these new features have been added to the UI as well, which is really great. A small warning though, there's really too much to talk about, so I will go over some of the most impressive changes only tonight. It all began back in February, when the first relatively small addition was made, brightness step-in. It allowed changing the brightness of a light relatively to its current brightness. And while this sounds logical and sensible, we didn't have such a thing. And I think this might have triggered actually all the changes we had this year. This year brought you repeats and loops. These repeats allow for repetition, sorry, this is a really bad joke, of a sequence of actions, so you can repeat a sequence of actions multiple times. It comes in 3 flavors: a counted repeat, controlling how many times the sequence is repeated; a while loop that keeps repeating as long as the conditions are met; or a repeat until, which is a sequence that runs at least once, and after that will repeat until conditions are met. Next up is the chooser, for which I first of all want to thank Phil Bruckner for, as this is his amazing work. So the chooser is probably one of the most important pieces added to the automation engine this year. It's capable of choosing which sequence of actions it should run based upon conditions. And this allows for the so-called if-else or switch constructs that are really helpful. This example here on the slide shows one automation that controls two buttons. Each of those buttons have different actions. And this really helps reducing the amount of automations one generally needs, as a single automation can now do two different things. And then we have the wait for trigger action. It allows to hold the current automation until another specific trigger fires. For example, Home Assistant can send you an actionable notification saying, hey, you left the garage door open. Shall I close it for you? With two choices, a yes or a no. And the wait for trigger can wait for your yes or no response. And based upon your answer, it will take the right action. So I've been rambling for a bit already, but the truth is there is a lot more. Like run modes to control what happens if a trigger automation is already running. Sub-second precision and the not condition. A shorthand syntax style for condition templates. And you can now use entity attributes in triggers and conditions, removing the need for those templates in those cases. We have native data types from templates, making it possible to work with lists and mappings now. And variables. Yes, we have variables now. So, but foremost, a lot of performance improvements have been made past year. Like a lot of performance improvements, like a metric ton of performance improvements. And honestly, I even left out all the little things that have been added or improved. So summing it all up, it has been an awesome year for a scripts and automation engine. And that's all I have for you. I'm passing you along to Bram. Enjoy the conference.
Hi, welcome to the other side of the Netherlands in my office. I'm Bram, and I work on the front end of Home Assistant. 2020 was a busy year for the front end. A lot was improved in all areas. We made things better looking, we added new functionalities, we made it faster, and we made it easier to use. Let's take a look at just a few of the things we did this year. When people hear front end, they immediately think of Lovelace. So let's start there. Last year, Lovelace became the default, replacing the old Stage UI. This year, we removed the Stage UI. When we did that, we got a lot of feedback from people that love to have the auto-generated Stage UIs next to their customized Lovelace dashboards. So we added the functionality to create multiple Lovelace dashboards. So you now can create unlimited Lovelace dashboards, and they can all have their own configuration. So you can have a dashboard that is managed through the UI, a dashboard that's auto-generated, and a dashboard that is managed through YAML, all at the same time. Let's take a look at some Lovelace cards. The entity cards this year got support for headers and footers, so you can add elements on top of the bottom of your cards. This is great as it allows for cards, for example, for an area where you have a picture of an area on top and buttons to activate scenes for that area on the bottom. Zac gave our media card a makeover. It was inspired by the Spotify media card in Android, and it takes the colors of the album cover. So if the track you're playing changes, so do the colors of the card. And we did a lot more in Lovelace. We introduced the calendar card, we introduced the entity card, logbook card, the grid card, and a lot more. But we also focused on managing your Lovelace dashboard through the UI. We improved our editors with support for more features, so people that are not comfortable with YAML can still use them. And we changed our card picker. It now shows a live preview of the cards using your own entities. This makes it much easier to pick the card you're looking for.
Another thing we added is the media browser. It allows you to browse for a song in your media collection on Spotify to pick something to play, but it also allows the link integrations. Integrations that provide media, like the recordings of your Netatmo camera, and integrations that can play this media, like Google Cast. And you can even play your local media right in your browser. In the future, we will also add support for the media browser in things like automations. So for example, you can pick an album to play when you scan a tag with the new tag integration. We also have this awesome new quick bar. It was added by Donnie. By pressing C for comments or E for entities, anywhere in the UI, you will get this dialog. It makes it so easy to quickly find an entity or reload some YAML configuration without navigating for the page you are on. We will definitely add more comments to this. Let's move on to the configuration panels. A lot has changed here. We made a design early this year for how we want the configuration panels to look, and we have been working throughout the year on implementing this. We introduced icons for integrations, we grouped multiple entries of your integration together, and we now show you when an integration needs attention. For example, when it needs to be authenticated. Devices now have their own dedicated pages that show you all the places where devices are used in, like automations and scenes, and it allows you to easily create new ones. And integrations like Zigbee can now integrate to these pages, so you have all device information and actions in one place. Everything is just more connected with each other. You can add all the entities of a device to your Lovelace with one click, and from an entity, you can easily see what device or integration it belongs to. And you can now upload pictures for a person right from the UI. Just drag and drop a picture in there, crop it to size, and done. We plan to take this uploader and use it in more places, like Lovelace cards. Another cool thing we added was the ability to edit and add zones through the UI. You can now just draw a circle on a map instead of having to search for the coordinates. We made it in a way that you can combine zones that are defined in YAML and that are created in the UI. And finally, we added dark mode. The dark mode will follow your OS settings by default, and you can even pick another primary color to use if you don't like our default blue color. That's all for the front end. I want to thank all the contributors this year, and we now move on to the Companions app, starting with Justin, who will update you about the Android app.
Hi, everyone. Welcome to New York State. Notice I say state, not the city. My name is Justin. I'm one of the primary developers for the Home Assistant Android companion app. A lot's happened this year since we released the Android application. I'm going to quickly talk about how many people we've been able to reach and how many people have helped us to get there. I'm going to show you how far we've come with the app since our first release last year, highlight some of the coolest features that we have, and finally talk about what's coming next for the companion app. First up, our Play Store numbers. We currently have over 250,000 devices active and still rising every single day. And these are just numbers from the Google Play Store, not including unique users downloading from GitHub. Almost 7,000 of these users are beta testers, and I can't thank you enough for helping us ensure that we have stable releases. Our 6.7 star average rating puts us near the top of the charts for home automation categories on Google Play. This year, we've had 44 unique contributors with over 500 pull requests. As it stands today, we have over 27,000 lines of code supporting all Android phones and tablets running 5.0 and later. Like I said, we've come a long way since our first release last November. We went from a blank settings screen to multiple scrolling lists of settings that you can pick from. Our first release was actually less feature-rich than the progressive web app that you could install on Android. Since then, we've added 62 new widgets and sensors ranging from your battery statistics of your phone or tablet to the last notification your phone displayed, allowing you to integrate with virtually any application that displays notifications. We're adding more sensors all the time, and I don't have time to go over all the sensors we currently have, so be sure to check out the settings to enable sensors that you might want to check out. So what's new with the Android app, you might ask? It's funny you might ask that because everything is new. This is our first actual release since we've been released. The first thing I want to bring up is our onboarding flow, which is now Google Play Store compliant. This might not sound like a lot of work, but there have been recent rule changes around applications and location permissions. So we are now fully compliant with the Google Play Store and shouldn't have any issues getting approved in the future. Next, we have the Power menu. This offers native local control directly to your Home Assistant instance. There's no dependency on the cloud. This allows you to start scripts, toggle lights, change the temperature, and more without ever opening the actual application and just long pressing the power button. We were one of the first applications to truly take advantage of this new feature, and we have plans to support more domains in Home Assistant in the future. The last item I wanted to point out was our widgets. Not only can you create a variety of different types of widgets, they're now editable. So if you make a typo or want to change your widget, all you have to do is change it and it'll instantly update on your home screen. Lastly, what's next? We're really hoping to support Wear OS soon, so you can do all the notifications, actions, and whatnot from your watch. We're hoping to add Google TV support once we can fully support the onboarding flow. And who knows, maybe even Android Auto support once we find a good use case for it. That's all I have to share about Android today. Next off to Zac to talk about the iOS companion app.
Hello, my name is Zac West. I'm talking to you from San Francisco, California, and today I'm going to be talking about the iOS app, which I've been a primary contributor for the past 6 months or so in this coronavirus lockdown amazingness. First up, let's talk about what the current state of the iOS app is. So a lot of our statistics got reset when we moved from Robbie's personal account to the Nabakasa shared account. It's unfortunate that we lost some of the historical data, but we can pull the current data. And part of the work done this year is removing Google as much as possible from the integrations we use. So a lot of our numbers come from Sentry now. Sentry, like in the Supervisor, provides us crash data and other user account information that you can opt into or opt out of. So we have about 150,000 devices on the past 3 or 4 versions. 99.75% of users are crash-free, which I think is pretty good. Could be a little bit better. I'd like to see 3 nines there. We've had about 400 pull requests from 5 contributors. This averages something like 100,000 lines added and 50,000 lines removed. It's been a very productive 6 months or so for me. And the piece of information that I'm very happy to see is something that we can only get through Apple's analytics. So for those of you who have opted in, the background battery usage percentage is under 2% for the vast majority of users, which is, I think, very impressive considering the goal of the location tracking is to know a lot of information about you. And so that requires a lot of battery management as well. And so over the past year or so, there's been a lot of changes. There's iOS 14 widgets, starting with the action widgets that you can see there to perform actions. Multiple complication support was added to watchOS, and macOS app is in beta right now. You can download it on GitHub, and soon it will be available for release. And the macOS app also supports things like the iOS 14 widgets. And so over the past several releases, there's been a lot of quality of life improvements and bug fixes. Things are supposed to be a lot more reliable now than they were. There's support for HLS camera notifications, which when you long press on the notification, you can see the live feed of the camera. There's been a lot of improvements for location tracking. And across not just the iOS app, but with Android and with various integrations, there's now NFC tag support. So you can use your phone or other devices to trigger basically anything, but any automation you can think of using NFC tags. There's also been a lot of interesting work around actions. So actions can now automatically be created for scenes, and they'll automatically sync between your devices using YAML if you would like. multi-window support for iPad was added. This is a little bit of the Mac coming back into the iOS app since they share the same code base. And the watch, I think, is now very rock solid and stable, which is a huge improvement. And all the features work. As you can see here, you can also fill an entire watch face with only the Home Assistant icon if you'd like. I don't know why, but you might be interested in that. And so looking forward to 2021, there's some cool stuff that came available in iOS 14. I think the most interesting is local push notifications. So local push notifications require iOS 14, but it lets us send notifications from your Home Assistant instance to your phone or iPad or watch without going to Apple, without going to the cloud. And so one really cool use case of this is for your boat that's powered by Home Assistant, or your RV, or your cabin in the middle of the woods. You can get notifications without needing an internet connection. This requires a lot of tooling on both the apps and in core, and hopefully will come soon. Additionally, there's a lot of potential for iOS 14 widgets. They are limited, but there's a lot of things we can express that are a lot similar to watch complications. So if you have any ideas, feel free to post in the community forums. I'd love to hear them. The Mac OS app, it needs a bit more work. It's almost there. It's certainly usable in beta, and you can use it to watch your camera status, your microphone status, and change automations based on those. And so that should be coming soon. And multi-server support, I hear you. It's a very popular request. It's also a very large amount of work. I've started tackling this a little bit. It requires a lot of refactoring and a good deal of work to get it done. So how to help? File bug reports. If you want to learn Swift or iOS, please jump in and ask questions in the Discord channel. I've been doing this for 12 or 13 years now, so I'm super happy to spread knowledge. And join the iOS beta, which is /iOS/beta on the Home Assistant website. And a shout out to Skycrier, for example, on GitHub, who filed about 6 or 7 watchOS bug reports, and that really helped trying to diagnose all of the issues. Thank you.
Hi again. One of my tasks is to be the project manager for the new OpenCV integration that we launched this year. To understand the origin of the new OpenCV integration, we should start looking at the old CWave integration and its limitations. The old integration takes a long time to set up, since it's not ready until all the nodes of the CWave network have reported in. It only supports a single CWave controller on the same computer that runs Home Assistant, and the CWave support is held back by an outdated Python wrapper, which only supports OpenCV 1.4. We wanted to make a better solution, a solution that separated the CWave hardware and drivers from the Home Assistant integration, while still making it easy to use the OpenCV C++ library. This was realized when Justin Hammond, the maintainer of OpenCV, made Qt OpenCV, a wrapper for the OpenCV library. It's a service that allows you to remotely manage a CWave network with a daemon running in a Docker container. The OpenCV daemon is responsible for connecting to the CWave USB controller. And for the Supervisor, we have made an add-on that runs the daemon. To connect the daemon to the integration in Home Assistant, MQTT is used as transport. Messages are published as retained from the daemon to the MQTT broker. And this allows you to reload the integration or restart Home Assistant and instantly get the current status of the CWave controller and your devices. Using MQTT also allows you to put the CWave controller on another computer than the computer that runs Home Assistant. And you can also use multiple CWave controllers on different computers and have all the messages routed to the integration in Home Assistant. The OpenCV daemon runs the latest version of OpenCV, based on version 1.6. This means that new devices that require this version can be supported. And since we're using the latest version, updates to the device database config settings will reach users faster. For this release, we made it more easy to set up the integration for users running the Supervisor. Just start the setup of the integration from the GUI, and everything will be set up for you, and you can configure the USB path and network key. And if you already have the add-on installed and running, you will now also see a discovery notification for the OpenCV integration on the integrations page. Click Configure and then confirm the setup, and you're done. To make it easy for you to move over from the old integration to the new integration, we are working currently on a migration wizard. Keep your eyes open for this next year, and also the end of the beta period in the first quarter. Finally, I'd like to thank all the contributors that have worked on the OpenCV integration and add-on during the last year. Many people are helping moving the project forward, either by opening an issue, reporting a bug, or by adding new features in a pull request. We appreciate all the help and feedback we get from the community. Thank you, and see you next year.